Welcome into Dallas Mavericks today. I am your host, Harrison Graham. Is Jalen Brunson leaving Dallas? Kind of feels that way based on recent reports. Mark Stein, late on Tuesday afternoon, tweeted this out, wrote Friday that the Knicks had amassed major momentum in their pursuit of Jalen Brunson after draft night. There is a growing resignation in Dallas, sources say, that the Knicks are indeed Brunson's top choice and his inevitable destination. What can I say? This sucks. I mean, there's really no way around it. It's a bummer if it ends up playing out this way. I hope the Mavs at least get some sort of meeting with Brunson and at least get to make a pitch to keep him, but sounds like the momentum's heading that way, and it sounds like the Knicks have made a strong push, even though technically that would be tampering, but his dad's on staff, so I'm sure they've talked. It's a bummer. We'll break this down, and then we'll take a look at some top Jalen Brunson replacements. Before we do that, what is your one-word reaction if Jalen Brunson does indeed leave Dallas? Give me one word down in the comments. You could say sucks. You could drop an F-bomb. You could say whatever you want. Give me your one-word reaction if Jalen Brunson leaves Dallas. My one word isn't like even anger. It's just slight frustration. It's disappointed. I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. The classic phrase, right? It's just disappointing because we saw this year and we saw in the playoffs that Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic were really learning how to play together despite them both liking to have the ball in their hands. We saw Brunson's growth in Dallas as a player. His first 2 years kind of in that 9-point range, and then he jumps to 12.5. The efficiency jumps up last year. This year, he has a great season at over 16 a game, 5 assists, 50% from the floor, 37% from three. He's good in the playoffs. He was tremendous without Luka in those first couple of games against Utah. And then he still played well even when Luka came back at over 21 points per game. Good efficiency from the field. Slightly down from three compared to the regular season, but it's playoffs. Things get ramped up defensively. I think we were just starting to see what Brunson could be with Luka Doncic, but it appears he wants to go run his own team in New York. Certainly free agency rumors are heating up, not necessarily in a good way when it comes to Jalen Brunson. So subscribe right now. Good news, bad news, fun news, disappointing news. We'll cover it all during free agency, so subscribe. It's youtube.com/MavsTV. We'll have more Dallas Mavericks news and rumors videos coming up throughout the offseason. All right, so that's the latest on Brunson. Let's get into some Jalen Brunson replacements on today's show. Going to focus on 5 guys, and then we'll briefly hit on some other deeper options as well. Let's start with Collin Sexton. Now, I do want to preface this with, again, Jalen Brunson, let's say he signs for $25 million with the New York Knicks. It's not like the Mavs have that money. They're already in the tax. If they go get a guy like Collin Sexton, they would have to trade a couple of contracts to other teams like a Davis Bertans, a Tim Hardaway, maybe a Maxi Kleber, Dwight Powell, whatever, to clear enough to bring in Sexton in free agency, as he is a restricted free agent with the Cavs. Now, recently, Sexton was cleared for basketball activity. I think Shams broke that report. Shams also mentioned he could get up to $20 million per year coming off that injury with the Cleveland Cavaliers, so keep that in mind as well. Now, if you could find a way to bring in Collin Sexton without losing major pieces, like if you could dump a guy like Davis Bertans and another piece to bring in Sexton to play next to Luka, a 20-point scorer in his career over his 4 seasons in the NBA, a guy who can shoot the ball, he can play on ball, off ball, kind of similar to Brunson in that way where he doesn't have to have the ball in his hands to be effective, but he certainly can and is very effective with the ball. Coming off the injury, but this would be, I think, a home run replacement if you could get a guy like Collin Sexton. Let's go to Malcolm Brogdon, who has 1 more year left on his deal with the Indiana Pacers, but he's been connected to trade rumors throughout the offseason as Indiana could be looking to shake things up a bit and enter a rebuild. Now, Brogdon's cap hit for the upcoming season, $22.6 million. So, again, you got to get in the ballpark in a trade for Malcolm Brogdon to bring him on board. I think you look at some tradable contracts here for Dallas. Spencer Dinwiddie, just over $20 million. I don't think he'd be a guy you're going to move, but that could be an option. Tim Hardaway at $19.6. I think it's more and more likely that he's back. You look at the rest of these contracts. Davis Bertans, $16 million. That's a contract you would like to move. Dwight Powell at $11 million. That's another one. I think the Mavs want Maxi Kleber back at $9 million, but you could move that contract. Josh Green at just over $3 million could be appealing for some teams. Maybe a team like Indiana. Head coach Rick Carlisle, who was a part of a regime who drafted Josh Green a couple years ago, that could be appealing. So here's a trade idea I put together. Malcolm Brogdon to Dallas for Josh Green, $3 million. Davis Bertans is $16 million. So you're in the ballpark, $19 million, and a 2025 first-round pick. Maybe you'd have to throw like a Ntilikina to match salary just to tick more, but something like that for Malcolm Brogdon, who's entering a contract year. He's been banged up. I think that's a pretty fair deal for both sides. So who says no? I guess Indiana could try and get more for Malcolm Brogdon, but you're sending them a future first, a guy who was a first-round pick a couple years ago in Josh Green, and Davis Bertans, who is overpaid but is a good floor spacer and salary matcher there. I don't think that's a bad deal. Type M for the Mavs, type P for the Pacers. Who says no to this trade idea? How about Victor Oladipo, who's an unrestricted free agent with the Miami Heat, who Oladipo has had a ton of injuries himself, but he looked good late in the year. I thought he played pretty solid for Miami this past season as he's battled back injuries, got back late in the year, played solid, earned real playoff minutes from Eric Spoelstra, the Heat's head coach, one of the best coaches in the NBA. He was getting playoff run over Duncan Robinson, who's making a bunch of money. Could Oladipo play under the taxpayers mid-level, $6.3 million? Could you get him under that contract? If you could, you don't have to move any money around. And again, he's not Jalen Brunson at this point, but I think he could be an adequate bench guard or a guy that could start for Dallas at the 1 or the 2 for the Mavs. He's got positional versatility. Used to be a great defender when pre-injury. Maybe he could get closer back to that with a healthy offseason. I think for the taxpayers mid-level, if you could get Oladipo at $6.3 million, that would be a pretty good coup for Dallas. All right, NBA free agency, it gets here tomorrow, June 30th, Thursday. We will have you covered on Chat Sports, youtube.com/ChatSportsTV. Join us as we find out together where Jalen Brunson's going to sign. I think it's going to be the Knicks. I hope I'm wrong. Things have happened quickly here. Hit that big red button. Regardless of what happens, we will have you covered with every signing that happens across the NBA and, of course, for the Dallas Mavericks. How about Tyus Jones, who has been the backup in Memphis for a few years, has backed up Ja Morant, and is widely considered the best backup point guard in the NBA. Last year, had another great season, 9 points per game, 4.5 assists, only 0.7 turnovers, by the way. His assist-to-turnover ratio is just ridiculous. 2.5 rebounds, good three-point shooter. The Grizzlies, when Ja was out, had like a 20-5 record or something like that, and that was with Tyus Jones starting when Ja would miss games with injuries. I think Tyus Jones might command $10+ million per year, which could price the Mavs out of it. Like, I don't think you're getting Tyus Jones at the taxpayers, $6.3 million. We'll see what happens there. Maybe his money dries up and you could get him at that level. But if that's the case, the Grizzlies might just bring him back. So we'll see. I like Tyus Jones. If you do bring him in, where does he fit? Does he start? Does Dinwiddie start? I think that gets a little clunky, but an excellent ball handler and can run an offense. I like Tyus Jones quite a bit, and he's a good shooter. Kemba Walker. Listen, he's technically with Detroit right now. Played briefly with the Knicks last year. Then they agreed to just sit him out because that wasn't working out well. Expected to get bought out from Detroit. That is the expectation at some point. Then he would hit free agency. In 37 games last year, okay, 11.5 points, 3.5 assists, 37% three-point shooter. That's still a decent clip. Now, he's definitely not what he was. He's clearly declined here. Just a couple years ago, he's an 18, 20-point scorer. Now he's, probably in that 10 to 12-point range, 11.5 last year. Question is he washed or can he still contribute for you? The defense is not good. Just know that going in if you bring in Kemba Walker. But if you can get him for cheap, maybe even the vet minimum at this point for Kemba, for sure the taxpayers, I don't think you'd have to go more than that. I think that could be appealing for Dallas. The question is Kemba washed up? They tried to get Kemba a few years ago. Type W for wash, type N for not yet. He's still got something in the tank. What do you guys think? Get your votes in the comments. Other options out there, Goran Dragic. He's not really a replacement, but I think he's a guard that very likely could sign in Dallas. I think he's an upgrade from Trey Burke. Beyond that, hard to say how much he'd bring to the table. Dennis Schroeder. I like Schroeder. He's not well liked around the league, apparently. And apparently Dirk Nowitzki doesn't like him much, so that could be a problem. Ricky Rubio, I've liked him for a long time. I think as a backup point, he makes sense. But again, you got to balance, okay, if Spencer Dinwiddie's that guy, can Rubio play next to him? I don't know. Gary Harris, more of a true shooting guard. He's not much of a ball handler, but I kind of like him as a guy who can start or come off the bench. He's a really good defender. Lonnie Walker's intriguing as a restricted free agent with the Spurs. It would depend on how much his market dictates, but he's another name to possibly monitor as well. If Jalen Brunson leaves, who do you blame? Who do you blame? I think there's a lot of people you could blame. I mean, number one, you blame the guy making the decision, Jalen Brunson, but I really can't blame him. It's an opportunity to go run an offense and make $100 million, whereas here, yeah, he could make that money, but Luke is always going to get the shine here. His dad's a coach there. We've talked about that. Donnie Nelson certainly deserves a lot of blame. He's the reason Brunson is not a restricted free agent and an unrestricted one because they gave him that 4-year deal. That was a Donnie decision. Do you blame ownership? I don't know. They tried to, or Rick Brunson, his dad, wanted to get Brunson signed here before last season for $55 million. The Mavs said no. So a lot of blame to go around. Nico deserves some blame if he leaves. Let me know, who do you blame if Jalen Brunson walks? All right, we'll have you covered with more Mavericks news and rumors as things continue to pile up here. So subscribe. Don't miss any of it. Good news or bad news, we'll have it covered here on Dallas Mavericks Today.